Good day, everyone. I'll actually be talking about something very interesting. And before I go there, I would like to remind us of a particular trend, and I'm very sure you know about the trend too. I've noticed a particular trend amongst teachers, and the trend is the aspect that it's easier for teachers to ask their students questions, but it's somehow for them to get questions for their learners from their learners. And I mean, it's really easier for a teacher to pose questions to the students, but it's rare for you to find the teachers giving opportunities to learners to ask questions. And even if they give opportunities to learners to ask questions, it's really rare for you to see some teachers to actually wait for the student to to ask the questions and for them to actually give answers to the questions. And so that's what's going to lead us to the topic for today, and that is effective questioning. So, learning has not taken place if the teacher feels he or she has performed very well and the reaction of the learners does not show that learning has not taken place. So no matter how beautiful you've taught, no matter how well you performed during the teaching and learning session, if the reaction of the learners does not correlate with how well your performance is, then learning has not taken place. So which means that learning has to be tested for you to know if learning has taken place or not. So we all know that questioning is really the easiest method to test learning in the classroom or in any online class. So questioning is actually the easiest method. But everybody uses questioning, but not everyone understands the skills that needs to be developed when we are talking about questioning. So it's not just for you to question a learner, it's for you to develop the skill of questioning a learner so that the learner can also learn how to ask questions when he or she isn't clear. So we'll be talking about some aspects of questioning that should not even be. I'll be talking about how an effective questioning can be developed. So if you really want to develop effective questioning, you really need to understand that communication is a two-way process. So just as you want to be listened to as a teacher, you need to be ready to listen to your students as well. Definitely, if you want to question, we should know that questioning is much more based on the learning objectives you've already set. So you know that I want to question to know if these learning objectives have been achieved, if what I decided to teach these students have been able to achieve them. So you just don't come to the class and have it in your mind and just start questioning without preparing your questions. That's what I've noticed. We just come to the class and we just start asking questions. And before you know, you're already asking questions that are even off the track. So you really need to have prepared your questions before coming to the classroom to teach. And I used to advise that when you prepare your questions, make sure that you prepare it maybe at the reverse part of your lesson plan. I mean at the side of it. So you could actually put it down there. So when you're coming, although the questions could change when you're in the class, but you already prepared. You already prepared the questions while you're also preparing for your lesson. That's the way it ought to be. But when you want to ask questions, you just don't ask questions at every point in time. You ask questions in the beginning of the lesson. That's like a diagnostic assessment. You ask questions in the middle of the lesson to know if they really understand what you've been talking about. And you ask questions at the end of the lesson. So you just don't come in and ask questions anyhow. It needs to follow a process. So I use a code, and the code is PPP. You pose a question, you pause, and then you pause. So when you pose a question, you wait. You just don't pose a question, and because the learner has not answered you, and you're like, I'm trying to think of a name right now, and you're like, Olani, you've not been able to give me an answer to the question. Okay, you sit down. Then you call somebody else. Ahmed, can you please give me an answer to the question? No, it's not proper. You need to wait. You pose a question. The child's thinking process is at work at that moment. So the child is trying to think about the question you've asked. So you need to give the child time to think through the question. And then you can later pause and be like, okay, so Olani, I'm waiting for an answer. Have you been able to think of an answer to the question? And if the child says, I don't really understand, try to, recreate the question in another way that the child can probably understand. Then, if you see that he's not giving an answer, you can ask somebody else in another way and tell Olani that you're still going to come back to him to give an answer to that question. So that is the way questioning ought to be, because while you are trying to know if learning has taken place, you are also developing the higher order thinking skill in these learners. So you need to be able to question in an appropriate way. Just don't question anyhow. And I used to advise that when you want to question, make sure you use your Bloom taxonomy. I'm very sure we understand what Bloom taxonomy is. Okay, if you don't, I think I'm going to do that in my next video. So Bloom taxonomy, you need to follow the rank. So if you want to test their knowledge, there is a way you construct the question. If you want to test the application, if they can apply what they've learned, there's a way you construct it. If you want to test if they've been able to comprehend everything you've said, there is a way to actually construct the question. So for example, I'm going to give examples on how you can test for their knowledge, for the comprehension, and for the application. So for example, I want to test if the student understood or have knowledge of everything I've said. I can ask the question that, okay, Olani, what are the main parts of a flower? I want to test if he has the knowledge of what the parts of a flower is. And, the learner will give me examples. I've tested the knowledge part. If you want to test if the child has comprehended everything you've said, you can ask the child a question that, okay, the change in this flower structure, what do you think is the change in all of this flower structure? So the child will start thinking, okay, what has changed in this flower structure? My teacher just actually kept on the screen or on the board. What has changed? And the learner will be able to give an answer. And if it's correct, you've already tested the fact that the learner has comprehended everything you've been saying. And if you want to test the application, you could ask the child that, knowing the properties of, let me go to chemistry, knowing the properties of sulfuric acid and the composition of water, what happens when you mix these two? Now you want to test if that child can apply what you've been teaching since. And so if the child gives a correct answer, then the child has been able to show you that yes, he can apply what you've taught. So those are different ways you can pose a question. So always remember, you pose a question, you pause before you bounce back. PPP, you just don't pose a question and all of a sudden you want the child to give you an answer. No, their brains are not machines. You need to give them time to think. So they need to think through what you said and process it, then give you an answer. So if you want to develop questioning to your for your students as well, then you need to learn how to ask open-ended questions. I don't like closed-ended questions in my lesson because you're just limiting the child. So you're asking questions and the child just telling you yes or no. No, that's closed-ended question. Learn to ask open-ended questions that will make the child think and that will make the child ask you questions back. So when you're asking the child that why can't I use a semicolon in this sentence? Why should a comma be appropriate in this sentence instead of me using the semicolon? So the child will start thinking and will give you, different explanations. Everybody will give you different views of why they think that should be that way. If it's wrong, then you correct. And if the child doesn't understand, the child will ask you a question. In that way, you're already developing the habit of the learners asking you questions. So we should learn how to give open-ended questions rather than closed-ended. Closed-ended limits the abilities of the children. So we should learn to ask open-ended questions much better. And please, when you ask your students questions and they don't give you what you want to hear, you don't have to ridicule them. Something like, oh, since morning, I've been teaching this thing since morning. Now I asked you this simple question. This is what you can give me as an answer. I'm very disappointed. Please sit down. Please, that's just very bad. You don't need to ridicule a child because the child didn't give you an appropriate answer to the question. You just need to understand that such a student does not understand you yet. Then you try to make yourself much clearer. You don't need to ridicule the child because the question was totally wrong. So we're going to stop here, and I hope that if you can use all of this I've mentioned, you'll be able to develop the skills that are associated with effective questioning, and you'll be able to question your students or your children in an appropriate manner. If this is your first time, you can follow me on all my social media pages at Autumn by Esther and at the Chic_Teacher. You can also find my videos and more on my YouTube channel at the Chic Teacher. Don't forget to subscribe and click on the notification bell to be the first to get every of my new video every week. Cheers!